is the commission. We have a very brief presentation just to talk about some of the issues we've been considering. What we really want to do, however, is this is an opportunity to get your feedback and your thoughts. The charter, as if anyone who's been involved with the process before, is both a document that represents sort of the ground rules of the town and how we function, but it's also very much an expression of popular sentiment as to how people want their town to run. It is powerful in the fact that once you put something in the charter, it must be there. It goes beyond the term of any one elected board. And it's weaker in a sense that it's not really there for exactly the day-to-day decisions. So Lauren, if you wouldn't mind sharing the presentation we have, and then why don't we talk through that? And we'll then at the end, we'll stop for questions. And when we do questions, although I'll be moderating, we have our entire commission to talk and chat about it. So the Charter Review Commission, one of the first things we did is we wanted to understand the scope of the Charter Review Commission itself, what it can and can't do, how many questions it can consider. This was the charge we were given by the Board of Selectmen in accordance with the Connecticut General Statutes. An ad hoc Charter Review Commission is hereby established. I like hereby; it kind of makes us feel very official. To review the current town charter of the Town of Madison Charter and make revisions to be submitted by the end of 2021 to the town clerk. The final product of the commission should produce an impartial legislative tool that is practical, clear, concise, and upholds the commitment to government transparency. The commission shall consider recommendations from the Board of Selectmen as well as other elected and appointed boards and commissions, the town staff, public input, and to evaluate and consider the work completed by the ad hoc government study committee. These are our committee members. So I'm Joe McDougall. I'm the chair of the committee. Maybe each member would like to introduce themselves. Liz, you're up next.
Good evening, I'm Liz Daly. I have had a family home in Madison for 63 years, and I am currently the CEO of Conquer Cancer, the ASCO Foundation.
And hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Gordon. My wife, son, and I live here for about 5 years, and I work at Yale New Haven Hospital.
Bob? Bob, you're on mute. Bob, you're muted.
Okay, I've been a resident here for around 5 or 6 years. I'm a program officer at the National Science Foundation. The program I direct and the social science directorate is Decisions, Risk, and Management Sciences.
Dave?
Good evening, I'm David Osterman. My wife, son, and I have lived in Madison for about 15 years now. I'm the global director for environmental health and safety for a manufacturing company here in Connecticut. Yeah, glad to be on the committee.
Joan?
I'm Joan Walker. I lived in town for 25 years. I'm the founder of Unipen and the Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and a former member of the Board of Selectmen.
And as I said, I'm Joe McDougall. I'm the chair. I've lived in town for, I think, approximately 30 years. And I've been a planning and zoning chair. I've been on the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance chair. And by day, I'm a law professor at the University of Connecticut School of Law. And I'd like to give a special notice for a member of the public, Noreen Kokaruda, who up until Monday, something happened today, left the Charter Review Commission to take on her new role on the Board of Selectmen, but Noreen's been a member since the beginning. And last but not least, Lauren, would you like to say a word? Because Lauren is our town liaison, which is too small a role to define the services she's providing to this commission.
I am Lauren Rhymes. I'm the town coordinator and also the risk manager for the town. And I've been here for 7 years. This is my second charter process, and I'm very hopeful that this one will have a passing vote.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, what do we got next? So this is our timeline. The committee was appointed in January. We started meeting about a week or so later. We had our first public hearing in February, And between February and November, we've gone through a pretty methodical review where we started at the beginning and we're just about to end at the end of the charter. We had several opportunities for input from the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the environmental boards, I think as we call them, the Board of Ed. We heard from the Government Studies Committee. We really wanted input. It's not like anyone's a charter expert. This is our second public hearing, and sometime on December X, we will be having a third public hearing. And what we hope to do is to engage, talk about it here, and hopefully that'll inspire even more conversation. Our next steps, we're going to go and have a status meeting with the Board of Selectmen once we've finalized our recommendations. The commission's vote of document to send to the town clerk, have to send it by May 12th, 2022. The town clerk will submit it to the Board of Selectmen for review. BOS will hold a public hearing on the final document, and the Board of Selectmen review and approval of the document or resubmission to the CRC if necessary. It's iterative. The Charter Review Commission revisions from the Board of Selectmen review will send back to the Board of Selectmen. You see this sort of ping-ponging back and forth. They'll accept or reject it and advance it for a referendum. And then once it's a referendum, it's the process that many of you are very familiar with. The BOS publishes the notice in the newspaper of the charter draft. Town clerk sends a referendum question to the state for approval. We have a referendum date, and the town clerk sends the charter to the state. But for the next sort of immediate steps, we want to go through that second public hearing. We want to meet with the Board of Selectmen. I think we need to get them to extend our charge a month or two. And then we'll get ready to send it to the town clerk. So we're hoping for a lot of input between then and now. Significant things we've been talking about, maybe for those of you who were listening to the conversation just before the hearing began. First, one of the things we've gotten feedback on is that the town, most people have come to us and said they think the town is overall well run. I think that was a theme that came through just about every group. It's not that everyone didn't have ideas where certain elements of it could run better, but that it was well run. We talked a lot about the fundamental form of government, whether or not there should be a town manager, a town meeting form of government, an RTM. One thing that we spent a lot of time, and this explains a lot of our revisions, because you might see in the charter, the Charter Review Commission is recommending removing commissions. Doesn't mean we don't think certain commissions shouldn't exist. We just don't think they should necessarily be in the charter. Once a commission or a group is in the charter, whether or not that has any purpose anymore, it has to be there. It keeps meeting. The Board of Selectmen can create commissions, can remove commissions all the time, but once you charterize it, it's stuck. We talked a lot, and this is the conversation we were having beforehand, on the roles of the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and the budget process. This has been a recurring theme that we've heard from the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. There's a tension between this group, and I think it isn't just limited to those two groups, to try and understand the scope of authority of each board, and then to try and turn what feels like a good practice into a durable words on paper. Another thing we talked about was the Board of Selectmen term lengths and the Board of Finance membership size. You'll see in this document, the Board of Selectmen, we're looking to discuss term lengths going to 4 years to mirror the Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance membership to go from 6 members to 7, mirroring the odd numbered boards of all the rest of them. It's the only even numbered board like that. We talked a lot about how to engage the public online to allow for hybrid access, or maybe more accurately, to make sure the charter doesn't get in the way of a modern meeting as we understand it here, sitting in this month, more so than if this charter review had gone on 18 months ago. And expanding access and encouraging participation of unaffiliated voters through the nominations process by making it more accessible. These are just some of, I think, the more significant points we've talked about, and I'm sure I've missed a few. So what are our goals? Those were all the discussion items. These are sort of our big themes going section by section. We wanted to clean up the language. The charter, for some of the insiders on this group, we're well aware of the the paragraphs that make references to other paragraphs that don't exist. We wanted to clear those up. There were certain wording, anomalies. So there's just a lot of blocking and tackling. We wanted to talk about the charter scope. So town meetings, lots of things trigger a town meeting. And then one of our concerns is when everything's a town meeting, nothing's a town meeting. We wanted to make it a little more special, that it's for larger decisions. Some of the dollar amounts and thresholds are 20 or even 30 years old. So they just didn't make sense. One example that came up is the town can't throw away a desk. It was sort of that sort of thing. I wanted to modernize the charter, make sure that it refers to printed newspapers. That's quaint. Instead, we wanted to just go and follow however the state statute says we have to communicate. And we wanted to clearly communicate and define roles of elected and appointed boards, including descriptions, seeing where they are, and when we can, clear up their authority lines. Some examples of this: clean up language errors and omissions. This one where you'll see that nomenclature and usage will just make it clear that what we're talking to, what section of the general statutes. The term voter, when used in this charter, in the second paragraph, shall mean electors of the town or United States citizens. That was an and. And if you think about that for a second, that would be a problem. So, a US citizen or an elector, you still get to vote in the town. We're not disenfranchising people today. The annual town meeting, we made it a little more expansive as to when we'll call it. It'll be held in the evening to present the audit report rather than 45 days of the calendar year at 7:30. Maybe we can call them at 7, just to clarify what we're doing, make it a little more realistic. Now the next slide. Determine the charter scope. This is one of the ones where we wanted to look at the number of voters. How can we actually think about it? So be the voters of the town as defined in this charter. 150 voters shall constitute a quorum. It's been 75 for a long time, 75 since the town grew quite a bit. And we're looking to say, well, at this point in time, it would take 150 to move it up, felt like the right number. Purchase of real estate. This is another one where the town really couldn't make a purchase in excess of 50,000. We made it 250 until it triggers a town meeting. So the town, the Board of Selectmen, and you can look at numbers like this. It's not like there's a lot of magic to it. We're trying to say, well, with the Board of Finance approval, the Board of Selectmen has to have some ability to acquire real estate without triggering to a town meeting. Otherwise, we're hamstrung. And that number was set probably at a time when $50,000 had a different real estate impact than it does today. Nomenclature for modernizing the charter. We're a selectman town of government. We don't quite have the right nomenclature yet, but we do want to make sure that the executive branch, if it becomes, if a better solution comes, that they can adopt it. We've tried to get rid of what was a fairly gendered pronoun usage throughout, trying and minimize it. You'll see that in the next one, publication of town meetings, this is something I think was overwhelmingly requested by a lot of people, including staff. There shall be notice of any town meeting published in a newspaper having general circulation on the town website and other media designated by the Board of Selectmen. So we make it clear that we're doing outreach to the types of things people actually read. And talk about some of the roles and looking at the appointed boards and commission. For the Board of Selectmen, and this is something we're delighted to talk about, going every 2 years for selectmen felt like we were putting quite a burden on those willing to serve. They're running every 2 years, and we wanted to parallel them to the Board of Finance. For the general duties, be responsible for setting policies and ordinances, sort of clearing up and making it clear that's a significant separate authority. And for the Board of Finance, the thing I mentioned before, looking for 7 members, and the rest of that language is similar to other board designations, and making the terms staggered. No, that's okay, Lauren. I was at the end. So that's just a sampling of some of the things we've done. What I'd like to do now is just see if anyone has any questions or discussion points, and we would genuinely love to hear from you. So if you use your hand raise feature, that would be great.
There are 23 attendees on, but no one is raising their hand.
Come on, somebody's got to have a question.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. We're
Yeah,
getting
excellent.
Justin
Clearly-
Murphy.
Clearly, Joan, your call for participation worked. Justin, thank you for coming to this commission before too. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Justin Murphy from 44 Windy Brook Lane. And I just felt bad for you guys, so I wanted to ask a question.
I feel bad for us too.
No, I guess one comment, has this revised, you've obviously been working on this charter document for weeks or months, really. Has an ongoing red line draft available for the public or not yet? Just to make sure I didn't miss it.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Yep, it is on the website. If you go to madisonct.org/charter review, you'll see the board member information. You'll also see a spot where you can email the committee, and then you'll see another link for the current red line of the charter, which is everything that was approved through last Thursday's meeting.
Okay, great. Then that's my fault for not finding it. But so maybe it's in there, but I would just suggest, which as I think I've heard in prior meetings, not that we should have a town manager, but if we are to consider the opportunity to have a town manager, that the charter allows for that by, I guess, obviously a board of selectmen and vote and a town meeting vote, but not having to redo the charter, because as maybe some people don't realize, the charter is done every 10 years, correct, by statute. So that's my only comment, that if the contemplation of a town manager or even a 4-year term for first selectman, if that could be incorporated into the charter, that it could be implemented by town meeting or however, but not requiring an actual new charter is what I would suggest. Thank you.
So could I take this one?
Go ahead, please.
No need to respond. That's just my suggestion.
Right. So there's a capability to have a manager that reports to the Board of Selectmen, and that there's no issue in the current charter to have some kind of operational manager. To change to a town manager form of government, which is a very different type of government than we have now, that will require a full new charter.
Yeah, so Justin, I had been thinking very much like you, because one of the things for me, I'd like to make sure the charter isn't in the way of government, as much as enables and sort of sets the fundamental ground rules. But when we had council talk to us, we asked several questions on this point. In order to have a town manager, we have to agree upfront that we're adopting a town manager form of charter. The other thing, though, is my understanding is that we do not have to wait 10 years, that we can go through this process, because God knows, I don't think anyone else is going to read each paragraph again. We might have been the first to be quite the group like the editors. That once we adopt this, then if the town wants to consider a town manager separately, we can relaunch a charter commission for that point. And just to expand on Joan's point a little bit, there had been a question of vagary in the past as to whether or not a first selectman could structure the government he or she wanted. And we've made it clear that it's up to the first selectman. If the first selectman wants to appoint a chief operating officer, to be the central pivot, as in almost a manager equivalent beneath the first selectman, that's up to them. The charter is not in the way. But the town manager piece turns out to be, and again, a surprise to me, fundamental.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck Mettner.
Thank you. It's better if I'm unmuted. I've lived in town for about 25 years. I live at 59 White Cedar Drive.
Thank you.
First of all, I wanted to say that the list of your goals are wonderful. I'm very much looking forward to having everybody talk about these things and having it move forward. I'd like to talk a little bit about my time working in Clinton. When I worked in Clinton, I worked there for about 10 years. I found it very difficult to make any kind of long-term plans. I was working in the IT space when the first selectman could change every 2 years. So I'm very much in favor of moving it to 4 years. I think that's a good, reasonable amount of time. Obviously, you don't want to leave it too long in case you have somebody that's not very good, but you want to leave it long enough so that people can make some plans. Secondary, I imagine you know that the town of Clinton did move to a town manager structure recently, and I wondered if you had gotten any feedback from them. I'm also aware that the town of Cheshire has been in a town manager, used a town manager for many years, and I wondered if you had heard anything from them as far as feedback from how is that working? You know, how well does that work? I like the idea of a town manager for several reasons. Again, you could have a longer term strategy when you have somebody that you expect to stay longer. Now, obviously, a hired person could leave over time, but you would hope that they would be there more than 2 years, more than 4 years. But I also like the idea of a separation between the day-to-day operation of the town hall and the political questions. I'm a registered Democrat, but I'm really more of an independent. And I always get concerned when I see some of the materials that are distributed during the election time. I'm always amazed that after the election's over, these people can still work in the same room after they've thrown all these things about, saying lousy things about each other. I would like to think that the town government, there is the tax assessor, the tax collector, the board of certain boards of finance, et cetera, which really don't need to be so politically oriented. I would like to have them have some leadership that is also not politically oriented. And then I also think that we need to have a board that's made up of people that are going to provide feedback to that manager. And I think it would be a great thing to have a larger board than we have now, maybe 10 people, so that we can get more feedback from more parts of the town. I think a lot of things happen based on the politics, and I think it would be better if we had a better distribution of people, maybe get some more independent thoughts on the board that would lead the town by giving the direction to that town manager. Have I explained my thoughts? Does anybody have any questions?
First, thank you, Chuck, very much, both for the I'll tell you one part of your comments I think were reflected by a lot of people is the desire to have, consistency, across a longer period of time.
Yes.
Any other comments from the charter review? And I appreciate, by the way,
Chuck, have you thought at all about representative town meeting form of board?
My concern is that I think not enough people participate. And that's part of why I thought it might be good to have a larger board giving feedback or giving direction to the town manager, because you would have more people involved. And I hope that they would then talk to the townspeople more. I'm very concerned with no matter what number you put on it, that you're either going to require too many people to come, that you'll never accomplish anything, you'll never get all those people, or you're always going to have such a small subset of the citizens of town that that it can be overwhelmed by a small group. I work with the volunteer fire department in North Madison, and at one point I talked to the group and I said, do you realize that if we all went to a town meeting, we virtually would have the vote to do whatever we felt? And that's too small a group to be able to have that much impact on a decision that's going to be made. And you can't always go to a referendum. That's way too expensive and not timely. So I think that we need to work on something where you can't demand that people go to a meeting, but maybe you can have representatives of those people that are closer to the individuals, and then those representatives can bring more feedback to the management of the town. Did that answer your question, Robert?
I think so.
Great.
Thank you, Chuck. You've hit on one of the very big themes that we had, which is making sure that the town meeting itself is sized not too small, so we can end up with decisions that might be very narrowly tailored, and also not too often, so that nobody knows when a town meeting's coming up. But thank you very much. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for taking your time to listen to me.
Oh, absolutely. Rob Marzatelli?
I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Lauren.
Okay. Did you allow him to speak? Because I just lost my controls again.
If I can do that, I will, but I don't know that I can. I think you're the one with control on that. As we're waiting for Lauren to get control, this is why we're so excited about the role of technology in town meetings, because it never fails. Are you able to get control again, Lauren?
Give me 1 second.
Sure. So just while Lauren's doing that, I have in order Rob Marzatelli, Gus Horvath, Jack Dobson, and Bruce Wilson. So that's the queue that I'm looking at. Nope. I also have 2 Lauren Rhines, which is better than 1.
Okay. Try it again. Okay.
There we go, Rob. Thank you for your patience. Rob, I think you're on mute. There you go.
Oh, okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Rob Marzatelli, 20 Todd's Mill Circle, a resident for about 23 years, recently retired. So I'm getting more involved with the community and, trying to learn and spend some time in this area. And I thank you for allowing me to speak. A question that I had was with regard to the charter. Does it address, and forgive me for not being prepared and reading fully the charter, but does it address affordable housing and in that specific area?
So affordable housing is typically controlled by 830G of the Connecticut General Statute, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So we haven't placed that within the charter itself, since the charter is a bit more of a guidance document. That seemed to us, we talked about it briefly, if I recall, in a few of our earlier meetings. But the concern was that it's not the type of subject matter the charter is good at, because once you lock it in, as an earlier speaker noted, I think it was Justin, typically, while the charter can be brought up earlier, it's usually revised about once a decade. And so in that time frame, 830G could be changed, or policies could be changed, or we might end up with even new state laws, and the charter just is a little bit clumsy.
Yeah, from my understanding, I think it's been around for a while. I guess one thing I would just like to raise is that, should the charter, at least in a generic form, in some fashion, address it in the sense that, I think we can all agree that this 830G is here to stay for some time, and should there be some relative or generic phrases or references to how it should be at least dispersed throughout the community, and should there be a little bit more focus or a focus on this matter, since I'm sure as time goes on and people become more familiar with the state statute, that there should be at least some general framework or reference to it, in particular, as the town should address this matter and consider how it should be dispersed throughout the community and not necessarily centralized to a particular location within the town.
So Rob, I'm from my standpoint. So I support the idea that you're putting forth. I just don't know that this is the commission necessarily to look at housing distribution. To my mind, this is a structure that is well addressed by the Plan of Conservation Development, by the zoners, and frankly, since several of them are in the audience, I highly recommend you bring it up to the Board of Selectmen. I don't know that the charter is the sense, but I don't want to be the only one pointing that out, and want to open up to the other Charter Review Commission members if anyone else has a thought.
So yeah, Rob, thank you so much for participating. I guess a clarifying question I have for you is, what do you think is at risk by the charter not speaking to that section?
And before I maybe address that, I'm aware that other towns in their charter have provisions relative to this particular statute and affordable housing. But I think what I'm concerned about as a resident is that there needs to be some focus on this issue, since again, I think I go back that, just to frame this up for everyone to fully understand is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this particular state statute overrides any local town ordinance with regard to zoning regulations. So in that, I think that there should be some provisions that address a fair and equitable distribution of affordable housing throughout the community, and not necessarily focusing in on any one particular area of the town. And that's really the essence of the comment or statement.
Well, thank you. That's definitely clarifying. And I defer to Joe, and I think what you're hearing from us is that we tried to make sure that our town charter, which is the organic law for Madison, doesn't simply echo what the state statutes say. Otherwise, it would be pages, reams upon reams. But thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and again, just to certainly I don't want to reiterate the state statute, but what I want to just focus in on and state is that the distribution should be fair and equitable to the community.
So Rob, if I could ask if you wouldn't mind, there's on the town website, there's an email for comments. If you have specific town charter provisions from other towns, if you wouldn't mind just sending a link over, I'd be happy to bring them up at one of our meetings and we could talk about it. Again, I'm personally struggling with the interplay between the charter and an individual decision on that. But let's take a look. If there's something we can do, I think the affordable housing has been a problem in this town for as long as I've been involved in town government, which was a long time. And I think that to the extent, if there's something within the charter we haven't thought of, we should take a look. And I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you.
Next I have up is Gus Horvath.
Good evening.
Hello, Gus. Nice to hear from you.
Gus Horvath, 34 Aylesbury Circle. Lorraine and I moved to Madison in December of 1965 with 2.5 children. Related to the issues of the differences between charters for town meeting form of government or any form of government, town manager, Joe, you're absolutely correct. They are two recognized different forms of government. And in the 2000 charter, the study committee that reviewed governments, I was on that committee in 1999. We compromised on that and suggested that they appoint a town administrator. But the point I'd like to make is that Clinton ran into the same problem. As you heard earlier before, Clinton switched over a couple 3 years ago to town manager form of government. And they gave the townspeople a choice. They put 2 charters on their ballot. One was for the retention of a modified form of town meeting form of government, and the other one was for a town manager form of government. So they gave the folks over in Clinton the opportunity to make the decision once and for all at that particular point in time. And I would ask you guys to consider doing that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Gus. I appreciate that. Our next speaker we have is Jack Dobson.
Hello.
Hi, Jack.
Hello. Yeah, I just wanted to, I sort of had a question about the structural changes, as I think a few people have had already, about the timeline of when that would happen, when those discussions would be. Of course, I think if we sort of just said like, oh, we're going to switch to an RTM or a town manager form of government. I mean, I don't know what the time frame is between now and when your charge is up. But if like, I once again will also not know how we would potentially bring about if we wanted to change from town meeting to RTM or to town manager, how exactly that would go. But yeah, that's sort of my question on what time frame would that look like. Because I, full disclosure, am interested in seeing potentially what could happen with a representative town meeting form of government. And I don't know if I said my address, so I live at 318 Horse Pond.
Thank you. So I think there are a couple of things that actually are within if you remember the process slide we put up, in terms of what the Charter Review Commission recommends and what the Board of Selectmen recommend beyond that. The Charter Review can recommend numerous questions in terms of the vote as to how we ultimately suggest that this be presented to the public. This Charter Review Commission could complete its mission on the direction it's going in the current charter, which makes significant changes, and then request the Board of Selectmen to muster a commission, just a separate commission, just on creating what could be a town manager form. See if the public likes that. Similarly, we could present alternative questions on asking for census for a town manager or an RTM. One of the things that I think is, for me, is a concern, and it's sort of a practical concern, is that the amount, because the last charter hadn't been approved, the amount of things that felt immediate and pressing in terms of being outdated and frankly just incorrect that had come on through legacy items feels to me that these need to be approved. We need the current charter to be brought up so that it can function. And there's some of the issues that, for those of you that were on our call just before this, that when it comes to the defining the roles in the budget process, that we need to understand now in the existing charter before we even get to a town manager. So that's my thought. In terms of your question, what could happen? This commission could consider it. This commission could ask for both approval of this and a separate referendum, or this commission could, suggest to the Board of Selectmen they muster a separate commission, whether or not includes the same group, to then consider the town manager position separately. I actually think, for me, if I were sitting on the Board of Selectmen, that I would look at it and say, I'd really be more comfortable doing that if I knew the charter wasn't rickety but steady. And I maybe a small c conservative way of thinking, but at least it's a way to say, let's get ourselves corrected. So other members of the commission, I don't want to be speaking for everybody. You have thoughts on those pieces?
Yeah, I mean, in order to do an entire new charter for each of these types, that unto itself is a significant undertaking. And I think that was one of the concerns that we had, as we were going through some of the questions with town council was, okay, so that means we then have to do all the research and legwork to get a proper charter for that type of town government. And I think that, we kind of agreed that maybe we clean this up and then maybe even press to say, okay, would you, even on maybe even the referendum, would you like another review to analyze this form of government or that form of government and bring that kind to the public as well? So.
And I think one of the other significant things we did is we conducted a legal review of charter very early on in our process, right around the second meeting. There had been an assumption in the town that charters were one up and down vote of only one question. And, we haven't quite gotten to the point where we can address the fact that there are several options for that. And it makes a difference. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate your comments.
Yeah, Joe, you stole my comments there. That
Oh,
one of the nice things this time is that we can ask more than one question. And so far, we really haven't looked very much at all at alternatives. And I think we're going to start doing that.
Yeah. And the last comment I see is from Selectman Bruce Wilson.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, Bruce. Congratulations.
Hey. So first off, I'm very jealous that you get more participation at your hearings than we do on the selectmen hearings. So we're going to have to fix that.
Well, we're happy to come to one of your hearings if you like. We can. Well, we also do bar mitzvahs and weddings.
I like that you guys are considering ways to get the unaffiliated voters more engaged, unaffiliated residents more engaged. They are, after all, the largest demographic in the town. Do the state statutes afford the charter the freedom to do something to systemically encourage that?
So there's been a couple of ideas that we've had. One is the nominations process, which, as you know, typically has had a direct route to the Board of Selectmen, but also the town committees. We actually received some information about towns like in Massachusetts that the charter sets up an independent nominating committee, as a political function in town. So it kind of gives a direct way always for groups to receive nominations. Other things we've talked about is we've kept the description of the minority representation parties and minority representation rules within the description of the boards that I think tends to be a little more liberal than state statutes. Am I missing? What else am I missing?
We're looking to try to maybe potentially, and this probably will be one of those breakaway questions, to have equal representation among the two parties and the unaffiliateds on boards, which would mean kind of restructuring the numbers. It would take probably a couple of years for it to roll through each of the appointed boards and commissions. These are the appointed boards and commissions, so that there's more people brought into the fold of helping on the town commissions and committees. So one of the things we're looking at.
So it sounds like you're thinking about it from all sides, and that's terrific. With the issue of special town meetings, I think we've gotten better in recent years. They're not nearly as frequent as we've tightened up our budgeting process over the last 6 or 7 years. Philosophically, I think it should always be hard for the government to spend money on an extra budget basis. So loosening up the spending thresholds, I'm not sure is always a good thing, but as an alternate path, did you consider a supermajority or unanimous vote of both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance as a proxy for a town meeting?
No,
So
I don't think we have.
Appropriation that has universal agreement amongst the two elected boards, might be a way of keeping the spending thresholds down, but still allowing it to happen in a more streamlined fashion.
It's an interesting idea. We're kind of at that point. Bruce, I don't know if you were listening to the the conversation right before we started. We're also at the budgeting process point where who gets to say what about the town budget line items. And in somewhere these are a bit connected in their own way in terms of how to assure that type, account fit. So you reduce fewer of them, and then what's the best way to approve them. They're a little bit similar, but I don't know. I haven't given any thought to the two. What do you do if you get two unanimous boards? In some ways, it defeats the town meeting, but I kind of like the idea for some things. I don't know. Lauren, can we just make sure to bring that into our discussion? Does anyone have an immediate comment about that for the selectmen?
No, I mean, Bruce, thank you for that. That isn't something that we've thought of, but it does open up some interesting doors.
If you have any other magic tricks like that, Bruce, we'd like to hear those as well, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
No, that's it for now, I think.
Well, good. Keep them coming. The last hand I see then is the return of Gus Horvath. So Gus, if you have a follow-up comment, please go ahead.
Just the issue of the unaffiliated voters, which I am one of. For many years, as it was mentioned, they are by far the largest group within the community for voting. If you look at the charters of the RTM towns, the 6 of them, most of them allow for petitioning candidates for the RTM. And this is a thought I hadn't thought of this until it was just brought up a few minutes ago. What if we allow petitioning candidates, unaffiliated voters, to petition to get on maybe the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Board of Education, or maybe just Board of Selectmen, or maybe just Board of Finance Selectmen, but on the major boards considered? Would you think that might help open up some of these boards and commissions to other than those with political affiliations? If I recall correctly, I've read all 6 of those charters. One of them allows for a petition of only 25 signatures. And I'm not too sure I would go with that. But I know when I was in the town of Fairfield some 60 years ago, the RTM at that time, 100% of those running for office had to petition for it. There was no recommendations or nominations from either of the 2 political parties. Everybody who ran on the Fairfield RTM had to petition. And that is not true today, but that's what it was 60, 65 years ago. So think about, this idea of opening a door where unaffiliated voters don't have to go through a town committee or don't have to go through the Board of Selectmen to be considered for a board or commission, and especially for an elected board or commission. Think about it.
Thank you, Gus. I think it's at least been one of our main themes to try and find an open access when we can, and maybe reconsider even where we think they can, anyone can run for selectmen, but to see if we can limit those barriers. So thank you, Gus. I appreciate that. I believe that was our last hand for today. I would encourage everybody, to the extent you've given it any thought, to please kindly give us your comments. We are very interested. Really, it's a lot of work doing this, and we'd really like to have a charter that passes, that makes things better. And that can't happen in a vacuum. And also, I'd like to avoid things that may spark a discordant tone in ways that we don't understand. If there's something about it that you're looking and say, well, wait a minute, what about X? Then we would very much, like that. So, give us your thoughts, send emails, and look for what will be the third public hearing sometime in the coming weeks. Excellent. So on that basis, Lauren, I think we'll adjourn the public hearing. And if the Charter Review Commission can stay for a bit, we'll we'll continue a bit of charter review conversation for another 15 or 20 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to
Thanks,
stop all the recordings and then restart them all.